Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to our session. We look forward to having a great conversation and putting you in breakout sessions so you can discuss. Wanted to first say hello. My name is Tony West. I'm the Associate Dean of Students at Moreau Catholic. We are so excited to be here as Holy Cross Convocation has been a part of my formation as a Holy Cross educator. And we have been excited to continue to learn and grow during this year's convocation. Jerico and I would especially like to thank Marco Clark for this opportunity to speak, as well as his support and opportunities that he's given us all year in the work of racial justice and equity. We would also like to thank our administration, our leadership, our students, staff, faculty, and our parents in their continuous feedback, responding to questionnaires, and shaping the work that we are doing at Moreau Catholic in the areas of culturally responsive curriculum, in learning and growing in diversity, and of course in our SCL components. We would also like to thank our teammate for today, Robert, who will be assisting us in our breakout sessions, in our chat, in our questions, and our answer Q&A portion. It's not easy work, and we appreciate his time. I will now pass the mic to our social justice coordinator at Moreau, Jerico Abanico.
Thank you, Tony. So like she said and mentioned, my name is Jerico Abanico. I'm the social justice coordinator at Moreau Catholic High School, and I'm super excited to share this space with all of you and just to be given the opportunity to have a dialogue and conversation about what we can do for our change makers of today. So before we actually begin, we did want to present this quote to you all, and it was mentioned in our opening prayer this morning, but to really focus in and hone in on what Father Moreau believed education is really all about. And again, education is the work of resurrection. It was meant to be a liberation from the darkness of ignorance. It was meant to be a vehicle for the transformation of society. And it was meant to be a process that helped make all things, especially the persons engaged in it, new. And you'll notice a few sections of that are highlighted because we really want to focus in on those particular parts, that liberation from the darkness of ignorance, the vehicle for the transformation of society, and especially the persons engaged in it, new. So for today's session, we are going to cover a couple of things with you all. So just to give you a rundown of what our agenda is going to look like for today, we are going to speak on multicultural, ethnic studies, and culturally responsive curriculum, social justice leadership education, and creating spaces for our students, and how that ties in with social emotional learning, and fusing all that in to make, again, our change makers of today. But before we do that, we want to present these two quotes to you all, and to let you know that this idea isn't new, but we want to kind of go to the root cause of why we do this type of work, but also to give you an opportunity to see how does this apply to not just our session, but also in the daily work and practices in our classrooms. So again, our schools today are rooted in an educational system that was created to benefit a dominant narrative. The ideologies of racism and oppression are taught and moved through our educational system. And in order for our students to truly learn, our students need to be free from what is preventing them from being able to participate and fully learn. So the question goes and states, how do these statements connect and what do they mean to you? So we're hoping that this can kind of plant a seed in our opening activity and what's to come, okay? And we want to introduce you to two people. First and foremost is Philip. So let's go ahead and listen to his story real quick.
The first time I can remember thinking about race was when I was 3 or 4 years old. I was in the car with my mom. She was driving us to my grandma's house, and we were driving on a different road than usual. Along that road were several neighborhoods where Black people lived. I said out loud to my mom, "I don't like those people." I feel a lot of emotions remembering that story, mostly shame. When I talk about that story with my mom recently, she remembers being shocked when I said that. She wondered where I had gotten that type of thinking, because according to her, she didn't teach me that. She's right. She never taught me anything to say something like that. But somehow, I'd pick up that thinking somewhere.
Okay, give you a few seconds for processing, but this is Philip and his experience. Now we want to introduce to you Della and her story.
I think I was 4 or 5 when I realized that I was Latina. My parents moved from California to Connecticut. There were 2 other people of color in my grade, both African American. I remember being called a word I don't like to repeat. I didn't know what it was, but my whole body knew it was bad. I ended up getting a stomach ache that day and went home. My mom kept asking me if anything had happened that day. Later on that night, I asked her what the word had meant. She told me that it was a bad word and not to worry about it. She told me to be proud of who I was and my background. She even told me stories about our family and how many accomplishments they had made. But that night when I went to bed, my stomach ache turned into feelings of anger. I wish I was white. And then I felt like I was wrong too. I was so confused. Remembering this, I feel a lot of shame. I wish I didn't want to be white when I was young. It's like I turned my back on my culture without even knowing it and didn't have a word to describe what was happening.
So a lot of stuff to unpack, And going back to what Father Moreau had said, with education being that liberation from the darkness of ignorance, creating a new person, transforming society. We wanted to be able to bring you these 2 experiences so we can have a conversation around that. So today, for our first activity, we're actually going to break us up all into different rooms, and we're going to kind of discuss these 2 experiences. And again, the question goes and asks, what are your personal insights and thoughts on these 2 experiences? Okay. All right, so we're going to break up the rooms real quick. If I can ask our partner to please go ahead and break up the rooms for us, please. Cool, and go ahead and you can join your rooms now. We'll give about 10 minutes for discussion.
Excellent. We're going fast.
I was like, don't see the earring pull.
Yeah, I was like, okay, doing good.
No, everything, it's great. Great quotes to use and get them engaged and so forth. And I think it counted about there's about 20 something people in the group. It's great.
Okay.
I know there's so many
Sessions
at one time. That's good though.
I didn't realize we have 2 right now from our own, from McNamara going right now. Our new president, Dr. Barnhart, and our head of our counseling center, Ms. Oglesby, and so so I was like, I'm the director for mission at McNamara, so like to tell them like, no, I'm not going to really be with you guys. You're on your own.
I'll watch the recording later. Yeah, it's
Hey, Tony.
because there's some other things that were happening that I was like, I want to be in that, and then
Right.
Okay, I'll see the recording.
Exactly. No, it was funny. So I wanted to really actually be there for John, like Barnhart, like our new president, and like sort of like really encourage, like this is really the first foray for him into this whole thing. So Marco really asked him, like, John, you gotta do this. So we all still work for Marco from 2,400 miles away. So
Whatever you ask.
So
Push a message to all the rooms and say we'll give you about 10 minutes to have a discussion.
okay.
Maybe
Okay, so
7
just tell them how many more minutes, Jericho?
Well, Jericho just.
Oh, I just did it. Yeah.
Oh, you did it. Okay. Okay.
Told him 10, and it's really only like 8. So
Really?
you're a liar. Jericho, don't worry. I'm door dashing you some food right now. I'm just kidding. I don't know your address, but.
Oh, all this is this all recorded still?
Yes.
Okay. See, got it on recording, Tony.
So I should be nice to you. But yeah, so when they come back, because we are looking at 11:10, we can allow space for
Conversation, and they can kind of say their stuff out.
exactly.
Hey, Marco.
Or no.
Yep, sorry about that. How you doing?
Good, how are you? They're in breakout sessions right
I
now.
was gonna
So
say, oh my God, there's only the two of you and Rob. What happened?
no one signed up.
And
Marco.
Rob.
Holy God.
Sprinkler. Sure.
That was a little panic moment. So yeah.
Nobody came, thank you.
So yesterday it was fun. We had a room filled with people and the speaker didn't show up. So remember those days when a professor, how long did you wait until the professor didn't show up?
Okay, looks like we have everyone back. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for that. We apologize if it wasn't too much time, but we did want to take the opportunity to have a conversation in larger group to kind of have just that, generic dialogue. What did you all talk about? What are some of the insights and personal feelings that you had about the scenarios? So we're going to provide you that kind of space just to do that now. If you don't feel comfortable with speaking out loud, that's okay. You can type it in the chat box. But do we have a brave soul that's willing to share what your kind of group discussed?
I'll go first because I don't want to get in trouble for having my camera off. So what resonated with me, we've had a couple of conversations recently with Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt, who wrote the book Bias, which I would strongly recommend if you haven't read it. And she's a professor at Stanford University, and her son happens to go to our school. And a lot of the conversation, she tells this story about her son when he was 5 years old, having this experience of very similar to Philip's, of making a biased observation about a Black man. And she was horrified, right? Because she's like, we're a Black family. This is my research. This is what I do. How can this be happening? But a lot of her work is in implicit bias. And what she talked a lot about, which I think has been really helpful for me as a leader, is recognizing when we remove the shame from the implicit bias conversation and acknowledge that it is there, and we don't have to know exactly where kids are picking it up. We just have to know that they are, and be intentional about having conversations to dismantle some of that. That's where your energy needs to be, not this deep shame about, oh my God, I can't believe that my kid just said that, or our kid just said that. It's how do you help them to recognize where it came from and to educate them to move through it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Anyone else? See a lot of familiar faces here, so I might end up picking on someone, but and again, if you don't feel comfortable, please feel free to type it in the chat.
Without going,
I can share. Oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead, Sister Elaine.
no, you first.
I was just going to share that I really, I enjoyed the time in the small group. Thank you. It's one of those, I was amazed by and inspired by Jason's talk earlier, and I had a lot to process, and I really liked being able to connect your introduction, Jerico and Tony, and thinking about the student perspective and then connecting it to our perspectives. And so I just loved hearing Claudia's story and Sister Elaine's story. So I'm not going to repeat them, and I'll give time here to Sister Elaine to share, but I thank you for that, because I think we needed to go personal and start with us. And that was really nice and sort of unexpected for me at a big virtual convocation like this. So go ahead, Sister Elaine.
I also think that it was really cool that the three of us were from different cultural backgrounds and races. So our conversation, if we were going to be authentic in the first place, had to be pretty honest. And it was wonderful. We're looking forward to seeing each other at the next in-person meeting.
Cool, cool.
So we can talk more.
Excellent. Well, we're going to move on and we're going to put in some more information, and hopefully that rounds out this discussion, and then we have enough time to come back to it so we could talk a little bit more in the areas in which we can control, where we can help maybe a Philip and Adela in their learning process.
Mm-hmm. So what really stuck out to me is when Katie had mentioned, instead of focusing on that shame, what are ways that we can actually teach our students to handle these situations, right? To learn about who they are, their identities and things of that sort. So really, the solutions are this. We need to push for culturally responsive curriculum. We need to push for multicultural education, and we need to push for ethnic studies. Now, a lot of people might say, well, are these all the same thing? So we really want to kind of break this down for you real quick. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony, who'll kind of talk a little bit about some of these areas and give some examples with them.
And the examples probably are more important than the definition sometimes, but you'll see that CRC has been described as a pedagogy that empowers students to intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically use their cultural reference and their experience to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. In the way in which we did this at Moreau, when we're learning about this, was how do we put this into our actual teaching spaces? So when I taught psychology, instead of just teaching from the book, we would use psychological terms, we would go into the definitions, but when I'm asking the students to, in their final, to come with an example or how we can impart this into our everyday lives, I ask the students to look from their own worldview, from their own perspective. How is this applicable in the areas of what you already know from your experiences? An example is one of our students did her final, and she wanted to look at why Black boys were perceived a certain way. Where does that come from? So her deeper dive was in assumptions and biases and stereotypes. But when she looked bigger worldview, why are groups looked at as gangs? And what does that look like when there's a political gang? The Democrats versus the Republicans, or, are a gang of a fraternity or a sorority, and expanding that. But it started from her seeing how she was looked at or perceived when she wore a hood versus when she wasn't. Giving her room to give that space not only taught other people about how they perceive people based on their cultural wear, but also empowered her voice to the point where she then did a TEDx talk about conformity. So just giving that space and knowing that it doesn't have to come from the teachers. Sometimes it's just giving information and letting the kids figure out what that education looks like in their lives.
Mm-hmm. And as we take a look at multicultural education, we really got to think about where are the different aspects of our curriculum and how does it fit in with understanding that we are coming from a diverse type of world? Are we looking at our history classes and straying away from very Eurocentric type of teaching? Are we looking at pedagogies that revolve around those of narratives that are unheard of, right? So it's really looking at those kind of things. And one of the things that we do in class is to really acknowledge like even the space that we're at. So for example, and I love how we did it in the opening prayer, to acknowledge that we are on lands that belong to other different peoples, right? So where we're at in Hayward, we belong to folks, I mean, this land belongs to people from the Ohlone tribe and the Chochenyo people. So really just identifying that and knowing and understanding that, we come from areas that just teach all new and different things, right? And the fact is, we have to take a look at our curriculum. We have to look at our literature. Are we providing spaces and opportunities for minoritized authors? Are we looking at opportunities to say, hey, you know, here's this scientist who happens to be a woman of color, right? Is her picture on the wall, so to speak, so people can say, you know what, I want to do STEM and that person looks like me, right? And it's not just typical people that we might see in our books. Or are we learning a different side of history in that regard? So multicultural education really kind of fosters that idea that we do live in a diverse world and we come from different ideas, but let's look at where all of that resonates, right? And how we as individuals, how we as people can see ourselves in the curriculum that we're learning.
And then ethnic studies sometimes gets confused. We learn about cultural responsive curriculum and multicultural, and we might be doing those things and thinking that we're actually doing ethnic studies, and we aren't. Ethnic studies is giving the voice back who's actually teaching it to that particular ethnic group. So saying we have an ethnic studies course, and it might be one person of one group teaching it, and they're kind of like going over some experiences from everybody, is not ethnic studies. Ethnic studies is getting those historical books from the particular group. So a full-fledged pedagogy in ethnic studies would look like us talking about maybe the Civil War, but having authors from each ethnic group teaching that same historical event from their perspective. So not looking at just learning one thing from one dominant group and everybody going, oh, okay, that's what it looked like, from taking that one historical group. And what did it look like from everybody's perspective, and then gaining on that. And now we have a full story of American history instead of one story of American history. So in addition to how we teach the actual curriculum, it's how we teach our actual subjects. And that's why we want to make sure that we're infusing social emotional learning in every aspect of our education. When SEL first arrived, it arrived in a really good intention, but from a very dominant view structure. So when people were looking at like, okay, how we discipline people, it wasn't so much to learn more about individuals. It was more to maybe coax people to assimilate in a way that's comfortable for the dominant culture. So then you fit in this space. So you see SEL kind of transforming, their transformation, the more people are understanding what it looks like to put equity into this work. So I'm not going to go over the whole definition of these components, but you'll see parts of it that are bolded that talk about the equitable work. So in self-awareness, high levels of self-awareness require the ability to understand the links between one's person and socio-cultural identities, and to recognize how thoughts, feelings, and actions are interconnected. We talk about self-management, how to persevere through personal and group level challenges in order to achieve personal and educational goals, and how that might be looked at differently based on somebody's ethnicity, our religion, our experiences. Social awareness, understanding social norms for behavior in diverse settings. And that diverse settings does talk about diverse in academic levels, but also our diverse settings in our religion and our ethnicity. Relationship skills, how we bond, how we create relations with people of different and diverse social norms and their demands, and increasing that empathy. And then responsible decision-making to make realistic evaluations of consequences in various interpersonal and institutional actions, and to take the health and well-being of self and others into considerations. When we talk about this work, we do need to understand how the bolded statements do vary based on identity, and we can choose to intentionally teach these components, or we are going to continue to unintentionally teach these components in harmful ways. But there's either that or that. There's not like, oh, well, if we don't teach this, then we're fine. If we don't teach these things and be intentional in this work, then we are continually creating harm for our students in multiple ways. So how this transitioned to what we do at Moreau and the work that we're doing now. We looked at the social emotional components and where it might be lacking in what we are as a Holy Cross Institute. So when we look at Father Moreau's Christian education, our IFT models, our mission, what we want for our kids while we turn them and transform them into a globally responsible citizen, we had to look at what was important. So using our surveys from our teachers, our surveys from our students, looking at what we want to do and making sure that our 4 pillars are at the forefront of everything that we do, but then how do we make that measurable? How do we make those things tangible for our students? And in doing that work, we noticed that now we're being more equitable and looking at students the same way instead of looking at our students within our narrow views or our biases. And we know that this SEL work is difficult and it requires a mindset change for some educators. The equity work has to start with the adults before we can begin cultivating those competencies in the students. We can't teach model what we don't know. So there was a couple of quotes that I got from people that do this work already. So Donna Cross, she's a director of MCHS and SEL. She talks about how we have to make it a priority from the top down. This includes having an equity statement drafted by and adopted by the board. Then any decision that is made needs to pass through that lens. And Tiffany Golson, a director of Parent and Student Support Services, says, we promote SEL and equity by including the community in our efforts. We decided that we must use common language and supports that extend beyond the school day. Social emotional wellness and learning shouldn't simply happen to some families or students. It should be available for all at all times. So when you're looking at these words might look different depending on your school and your culture and what you do, but you'll see that there's some highlighted. We won't go into the highlighted parts right now, but you'll see there's a couple of highlighted parts. In leadership, that links, you'll have access to this, but that links to a video that we do for tone setting that helps our students not only see other student leaders on our campus, but talks about how they can become student leaders. Empathy is a form that talks about questions and reflections that you can do as not only an educator about where your empathy level is and where you might need work, but then also how you can have those conversations with your students to make sure that they're more empathetic. In a time like this where it's always a news story like every single day, how do we bring those stories into our classroom, but also give our students the necessary tools to increase their empathy, so that they're not just looking at this through their worldview, but increasing their worldview. So Father Moreau calls on us to teach with certain qualities. Christian educators really need to call from God in order to deal with all they are facing in working with our young people. In his list of qualities teachers must possess, we align those qualities with important behaviors that we already do in our daily teaching. In order to truly expect the transformation of our students, we need to teach character and not just teach the subject. By infusing these keywords in our lessons, we can highlight those who have used these important skills in order to find success. When we define what it is to be a Mariner or your mascot at your school, we make it recognizable in a way that has clarity and is attainable and does not exclude those who do not have those certain characteristics when they step on campus. By using this platform, it puts everybody on the same page. It becomes clear in which areas students need to work on in order to transform and carry out the Holy Cross mission. So with that new information, what we would like to do is put you back into groups. You might be with a whole different set of people, but put you back into those groups and reflect on your personal insights and thoughts. Did any of your thoughts or perspectives change about these two students, or how we as educators can work with students in order to change their reality? In Philip's mind of wanting to disengage with a group of people because of a lack of understanding, or in Della's situation of it might be easier to assimilate with this group, so I'm not called these names, as opposed to increasing her social and self-awareness. So we'll put you back into those groups and give you some more time to reflect and grow in these areas. Thank you. Everybody. So I'm sure you all had amazing conversations and have fixed everything. So so now it's your turn to share with us. We're going to take a couple of minutes to hear your feedback and how you felt CRC and SEL could have helped both Philip and Della, and any other ideas you would like to share. And again, it is your turn, so you will talk now. Thank you so much, educators.
So I'll jump in first. What the heck? I appreciated your piece on intentionality. And my first response to Philip's story was, if his mom didn't teach him, he must be getting it at school. And so many of us, think we have these great school environments. Obviously, if we are Holy Cross schools, talking about things like family and inclusivity and diversity and all these things. But really, we are doing a disservice if we are not intentional, as you described in your presentation. So I think we all need to step up our game if we're not there yet, and make sure we are, intentionally dealing with these issues and setting making our school community a safe place and a place of understanding, and helping our students to work through these issues. Because we know for sure with our clientele, at least at our school, we've got a number of kids who come from a home environment where they are getting that message that Philip picked up on from his community. So we, in our group, also talked about the fact that, the families need to realize, coming to a Holy Cross school, it's not just the academics, that we have this other piece, and they can't just deny it. We have a number of families that come to our school because we're a private school. Okay, but we're a Christian Catholic school. And so you need to prescribe to those ideals, or at least you're going to have to, get involved with those ideas. And so we have to make sure that we are intentional about these types of issues and helping the students to form themselves in a better way.
Thank you. Excellent. Who's next? I want at least 2 more voices so we could sit here and stare at each other or somebody else can talk.
Okay, I'll go. So I think one of the things that jumped out at us and we talked about in the breakout room was, once again, the intentionality, but in terms of making sure, we discussed stereotypes and how if you don't experience different cultures growing up, you may have stereotypes. And I think it also goes the other way, that students often just assume they're viewed as a stereotype. And we need to really focus on creating relationships, have adults create safe, trusting relationships so that the students can share with you authentically who they are. Because I know many just assume that as a white woman, I look at them and I assume they are the stereotype and they will exhibit that stereotypical behavior or response. And I have to create relationships with them where they trust me enough to share, oh no, that's not how I was going to respond. That's not how it felt to me, or that's not how it hit me. But it starts with trusting relationships, and do it, as Christopher said, intentionally. This needs to be intentional. You can't just assume I get good reviews as a teacher, they all love my class. That's not good enough. It needs to be intentional relationship with each of your students.
Y'all heard me when I said it was going to be one more person, so we could just sit in silence. Jericho did an amazing job with timing, so we have a little bit more time just to sit in silence until somebody feels like their voice is needed in this conversation because God put it on them to educate the other people in this room. Now you can see how I was as a teacher. Ooh, that guilt works. Oh, the nonverbals and the smiling and the love that I'm feeling from T. Billings. Oh my gosh. So Peter Shelley first and then T. Billings. And then we're going to let Robert, our teammate, talk as well. So now it's 3 voices. That's what y'all did.
Okay. So one thing that I've been working on in class, I teach a course currently on Christology, is looking at our Holy Cross language, and specifically Moreau, and then language in the Bible. And I was struck by the quote you had from Moreau, and the quote of the darkness of ignorance. And it drives me crazy. Why do we use the term darkness and equate it with ignorance? Why is Jesus the light of the world? Why can't Jesus be the darkness of the world? And so Basil Moreau has his own unconscious biases and needs to be called out on them. Holy Cross has its unconscious biases, as personally we do. And so I have, over the years, in terms of biblical language and the bias inherent in there, and how that then pertains into the images of Jesus that, the Western world promotes and that we've become accustomed to. And so, the personal stories of the 2 students, and how then can I, as a Holy Cross educator, confront the systemic racism that's present and that's present in the language of our faith. So Black is beautiful, brown is beautiful, and how, so there you go.
It's some of the lighting from God too. Thank you. T. Billings.
Okay. Well, I was in the group with Chris, so he already reported on our inclusion piece and how important it is that we, if we're not intentional about including this, the social emotional learning and making sure we educate our young men, all boys school in New Orleans, educate our Holy Cross students, that void would be filled by something. So that was one of the pieces that we spoke of. The other thing that we spoke about was the intentionality of trying to find some African-American educators. We have been looking at our historic Black colleges and universities in New Orleans area, trying to recruit. Our concern has always been there, though, is we don't pay as well as the public schools. And so trying to convince them that there's much more. Yes, they have to be able to afford to pay the salaries, and have to be able to feed their families, but, making sure that there's so much more, helping them see that the mission that they can fill the need for our young men. The piece that I didn't bring up was talking about teaching character and, our Holy Cross, about the Mariner. We have our Holy Cross man code that the young men live up to. But one of the things that I did notice that we've been doing a lot more of, talking to the young men about how it's a journey, that you don't enter the door as a Holy Cross man. And that part of that journey is learning how to be a social, emotional young man and reach out to others and have that empathy. But I will be stealing the piece for the 4 themes and how y'all have related to that. So thank you for that.
And Robert, yes.
So the words of intentionality, the idea that we teach students, not subjects, very core and foundational to, I think, our ministries as Holy Cross educators. At Bishop McNamara, where we're a majority minority school, I think one of the things that's been really interesting about thinking about a curriculum that really that helps us to think about our own implicit biases, the transformation for our own faculty. When I first came there 10 years ago, our student demographics have not changed, but in really I think for many of us and for many of my colleagues, we came to Bishop McNamara as, let's say, especially for those who are white, really empathetic and wanting to, but realizing we bring biases, and how we really engage our students and how we build that sense of respect and relationship is really, there's a learning curve there. And so I think that's been really important. So to really sort of bring these out during the course of this discussion, is really helpful. And just, I think from all of us, really just want to thank, Jerico and Tony for, great presentation, a really thoughtful presentation. So let's give them a round of applause, and just really thank them for, their efforts today. And just, thank you for, helping really guide a really important discussion that really is impactful for all of our schools.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So we got a couple of more slides that we want to show you, because ultimately I love what T. Billings had said and mentioned how when our students walk through the door, right, it's a journey, it's a process. And I mentioned to a couple of folks earlier that we have to understand that our students are coming in with so many different types, right, of baggage. So many types of different things, right? It just reminds me about how one student who I'm about to introduce to you came in not knowing social justice, not knowing, understanding, and how to create change, not knowing how to do any of these different things, right? But it's about the process. And then when we see that process happen, we create these change makers. So I want to introduce you to one of our students. If I can get my screen shared, there you go. I'd like to introduce you to Miss Terry Beasley. She's actually graduating this year. But when she walked through the doors, she wasn't a part of any of these organizations at Moreau, but she's a current leader in our social justice leadership class, a public relations officer for the Black Student Union, a great athlete in our track and field program, a part of the Student Athletic Council, and is a part of our St. Andre's program. And this is an example of what happens when we can fuse social emotional learning, culturally responsive curriculum, and these are our change makers. And this picture of Terry is actually when the students were doing a forum during the summer in response to the murder of George Floyd. And really just to give them that avenue and that space to create, to talk and to be given a voice, just to see them flourish. I'm telling you, like like I get emotional every time I talk about this piece, but it's like seeing the resiliency, especially to these seniors who've had their year cut away from them, as with all seniors in high school, but to still do the work, but to still be available and to be able to create change, just shows their resiliency, just shows their strength, just shows their passion. These students are hurt, right? They come in with so much different baggage, but our job as educators is to make sure that they can feel respected, feel heard, be given that space. Our job is to provide that opportunity for them. And this is just one example. And I bet you, all of you can think about that one student right now in your own schools, because we have them. And it's our job to foster that environment for them to become those change makers. So I'm going to turn it back to Tony, who's going to talk a little bit about what we did at Moreau to kind of help foster that.
And sometimes you'll have pushback, especially when it's moving into uncomfortable spaces of being an anti-bias educator, or I don't have time to put in this SEL or to develop this student in a different way. Our St. Andre's program, our students are coming in with maybe lower test scores, or we're not sure exactly where they will flourish in academics and everything. And just another shout out to Terry Beasley coming into that program and not coming into a school that puts narratives on you or stereotypes on you or glass ceilings on you, for her to come into Moreau in that program. And she's living Moreau not only as an empowered voice and a social justice activist, but she's going to UC Davis, which is one of our top schools in California. So just knowing the more that we pour into these things, the more that SEL is poured into a student, and where they have opportunity to put more things in them that actually matter to them, and how to apply the education into their purpose and passion, it creates this change maker. In addition, we have to allow them to practice these things on our campuses in order for them to be expected when they leave a Holy Cross school. We can't go, okay, do all these things and not give them practice and not listen to their voices, and then go, oh, well, hopefully in college, they'll do these things. No, you give them these spaces. So Terry was able to participate in creating a student leader solidarity statement that talked about racial injustices, to participate in our Voices Summer Forum and be a speaker, and to think of all the ways in which our faculty can do better things. And I mean, just coming from my position, they came up with their statement and was like, well, if we read these books, if we do these things, and I had already had what book I wanted our faculty to do for their book read. And instead of me going with, well, I know these things, this is my work, I'm an adult, let me leave space for students to actually believe that we are listening to them and how they can create the culture that they want and that they need. So our faculty book read came from our students' suggestion. And because of that and us doing the work at our school, we were able to be aligned with Marco and then given this opportunity. So because we were so student focused in doing this work and wanting to do better, it helps us as well. I'm not here if I don't have the students. So thank you so much for your time, you being part of this. I just want to say my little thank yous and hugs. I am reading stuff, and Teresa, I understand your name is Teresa, but I love T. Billings. You are a girl now, so you got a new nickname. But Thank you so much for sharing this time and space with us. We will have our next chat that focuses on diversity and inclusion, where Jerico and I are just facilitating, but we want to hear more from people and what they're doing at their schools. And then I'm going to leave the exit to Jerico. Thank you so much, Jerico.
Thank you, Tony. And again, thank you to all of you who sat through all of this, right? I mean, again, we are all partners within this work, but in addition to us partnering, we have to partner with our students. In order to create those change makers, we have to partner with them. And to remember one thing, again, Father Moreau spoke about education and how it was meant to change society, but also to teach and educate both hearts and minds, and to really foster that individual. So when you get these slides, also a couple of resources for all of you and where you can find some PD, a lot of different things. There are some links on here. Highly recommend this book. The link is on there to Amazon. So if you all want to quickly get that book over there, this slide will get it. But I love this book. The experiences of Della and Philip came from the Racial Healing Handbook. That is great activities for high school, middle school, and elementary school students. So these are great, great resources for everyone. But again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all of you. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Stay safe.
Thank you both.
We can stay on and have a faculty meeting too, if you want. Oh,
Thank you all for coming so much. Thank you.
Teresa's now part of that. Anyway. Bye, everyone.
Great job, Tony and Jericho. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
Oh, the baby. Have a good day, Peter.
wave goodbye. There you go.
There you go.
All right, go for a bike ride.
Well done, both of you, and just really great to talk, and great session, and thoughtful, and excuse my sort of, I just got caught up in it, and it was just easier to do. So thank you, Jericho, for really doing the back end stuff, and now that I do my next one, it's one person, so I'll be able to do more of the facilitating this time. So, but really hope to see you both in person, and if you ever come on the East Coast, come and see us at McNamara.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. All right. Have a great weekend. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Jericho, I'll meet you in the next room.